Hi guys, Arthur here from Homeowner DIY. In this video, I'm going to be doing the DIY version of a coolant flush for my 2011 Honda Fit. This is a simple process that requires minimal resources, so you should be able to do this job on your own without issue. So what we'll do now is material and tools. Alright, this is the materials list for this job. So I have Honda brand coolant. Honda suggests that you use their coolant. I think the cost between this and anything else is marginal, so I would just go with the Honda coolant. A new thermostat. The part number for this is 328-170 because the last time I did a coolant flush on this was 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometers. In my opinion, replace the thermostat with a new one so you have new parts. Latex gloves, penetrating fluid, and then degreaser. Guys, this is the materials list for this job. So what we'll do now is a tools list. Alright, this is a tools list for this job. So I have my socket set. I probably will only need a 10mm. Work light, channel lock pliers. For safety equipment, safety glasses. Extension cord for the light. A pan. Hose with a nozzle. A rag. Cardboard for any spillage, and then a funnel on the far right for refilling. Guys, this is the tools list for this job, so let's do this DIY coolant flush. Alright guys, before you even get started, make sure that the car is cool. Wait whatever you need to, 2 hours. You should not feel any heat from the engine because the coolant is going to be hot. That is your number one thing when you're going to do a coolant flush. Otherwise, the great thing about this car is everything is easily accessible. So we have our radiator cap here, our radiator, reservoir, our thermostat housing. So the way this car goes is, this is the supply hose from the engine block. So coolant comes here, it goes through your radiator, and then it comes back up through the thermostat. So the easiest way to figure this out is when the engine is warming up, this will be hot. If the bottom one is not hot yet, that means the thermostat hasn't opened. In other words, this goes in a clockwise direction. So the first thing to do is we have our couple bolts on our thermostat housing that we need to remove. And then we also have one bolt for our reservoir. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain out the radiator first. I'm going to take out the reservoir. We'll clean that all out. This car has 90,000 kilometers. I think that's like 60,000 miles. So it's very low on the mileage, but no matter what your mileage is, you're going to do the same thing. So this is the radiator fan here. The drain plug for the radiator is just at the very bottom here. Alright, so that's the plug right there. Make sure that your pan is right underneath it. I need to shuffle my pan over. And then you can either take it out the whole way or you can let it slowly drain out. One other thing I do recommend is remove the radiator cap to break the airlock so it drains out faster. Alright, so that is our drain plug. You can do a quick inspection to make sure that the O-ring is still in good shape, that it's not nicked or anything. And then if you want to speed up the draining of the radiator, here's our cap, and just pop it off. And then you'll hear how much faster it drains. And then once again, this is a good opportunity to look at the rubber, make sure that it's still in good shape. Like I said, I only have 90,000 kilometers on this car. Alright, for the reservoir, undo the cap. So again, inspect your hose. This is in good shape because this car has minimal mileage on it. So we have our 10mm bolt here that needs to be undone. Guys, remember, because this thing is plastic, be careful about unscrewing and tightening it back up. All right, so here's our reservoir. You see that it's near the minimum line. So just pour out the coolant from the reservoir. So really quickly to take note, you do have this tab down here that slides into a hole. We'll take a look at this later. But otherwise, this is the reservoir, and then we have this bolt here that goes in for the reservoir. All right, for the reservoir, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and rinse this thing out. It looks to be in pretty good shape, but we can clean this up. There's a little bit of coolant left in the very bottom. But I think just a little bit of soapy water, pour some soapy water into it. Cover the reservoir with your hand, shake it up and down, and that should be more than enough to clean out your reservoir. There's no sludge or anything in this, so this is going to be quick and simple. All right, now we have our two 10 mils for the thermostat housing. All right, these are the bolts for the thermostat housing. They're both the same. I always recommend to check and make sure that if your bolts are not the same, you're putting them back in the correct location. All right, the housing can now be removed. Make sure that you slide your pan underneath as well. All right, with a pair of channel locks, grab the very end of the thermostat, and then you can pry it out. So make note that your orientation, this cutout part was at the top. And then you do have these two areas here that will fit in the same spot that has been cut out. The thermostat needs to be put in a certain way, otherwise you're going to have a leak, and I ran into this problem with my Civic a long time ago. Alright, with the thermostat removed, now put the bolts back into the housing. And what this is going to do is, with the thermostat removed, you're going to be able to cycle water throughout the engine block to get the remaining coolant out. Hand tight is perfectly fine. You don't have to tighten it up very much. Alright, so the coolant in the pan can now be dumped out. Alright, this is a good opportunity to compare your thermostats. Make sure that they're both very similar, if not the same. The rubber here will have to be put onto this one here. It is better to figure out that you have the wrong thermostat now than later on when you have done your complete flush. Alright, I'm going to flush out the radiator, so I'm going to pour water down here. The drain plug is still out. Now I'm also going to disconnect the hose from here and then from the very bottom. And then I'm going to use the water to flush out the block. So it's going to go through the hose, and then from our bottom, I'm going to disconnect it from the bottom of the radiator. If you want to leave it on, you can, and just have it go through the drain plug. It's entirely up to you. Alright, what I ended up doing was I took my channel locks, I put it on the end here, and then I gave it a twist. Be careful that you don't clamp too hard because it's only plastic. And now the top hose can be removed. Alright, with the top hose removed, I'm now going to pour water down to flush out the radiator. So for now, I'm going to leave the bottom hose still attached. And then once the radiator has been flushed out, I'll disconnect the bottom and then we'll flush out the engine block. Alright, so with our garden hose, send water down through the radiator cap for a couple minutes. Here I'm sending water through where the radiator cap would be, and then after that through the top inlet for the radiator. Give this a couple minutes because the radiator is not that big, so it's not going to take very long to flush water through. Alright, what I'm going to do is now I'm going to take this off here and move my pan over and then put this into the pan. One thing, when you're spraying water, because you do have the fan here and it's electrical, if you need to put a bag or something over, you have to be careful about not dousing the entire engine with water because you have electrical components everywhere. Okay, the hose has been disconnected. Unfortunately, it's a little bit short, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to point this down into the pan, and from the top here, I'm now going to push water through the system. So because the thermostat is out, water will go through the block, it'll go down the hose and into the pan. Alright, with the hose, I'm now going to push water through the block. I didn't mention this, but make sure that you do an inspection of your hoses because this car has so little mileage on it. Everything's in good shape here. But if you notice anything, it is easier to make note when you should replace it than having a problem by the side of the road. Alright, when you bring the car in, make sure that your blower is on maximum and then your heat setting is on maximum as well. This is going to open the heater core to make sure that you're flushing the heater core out as well. And then the other thing is when you do your test drive, make sure that these settings are still in this position. So you push all the air out of the heater core as well because you could have an air lock and then an overheating problem. Alright, so I reconnected the bottom hose and now the thermostat, the new one, can be installed. Alright, so the rubber can be taken off. So the cutout here will go where this is here. Make sure you don't mix up your thermostats. So for this rubber piece, I would say I'm surprised that the thermostat doesn't come with the rubber piece, but probably it's a good idea to replace a rubber piece every second coolant flush. So this would be the second one. So when I do this one more time, that'd be 2 complete coolant flushes. I guess it'd be every third coolant flush. Replace this as well. All right, we're gonna start refilling the system now. So on the container says do not add water. Well, you just flushed water through the cooling system, but I think the little bit of water in the system is not going to be a big deal. I think it's going to boil itself off. In either case, it says not to add water, but as a DIYer, you're going to use water to flush out the system. Alright, the thermostat housing can be once again removed. Remember, these bolts are only hand tight, so it should be easy. Alright, so I'm going to take my degreaser here, and just where the thermostat housing is. Now this one is relatively clean, but I think it's a good idea anyways to wipe it down even if you don't see anything. And now the mating surface on this side too, wipe it down as well. Alright, so this is the thermostat housing. You see the 2 indentations. So that is where these 2 indentations is going to go. So it goes up just like this. So I'm going to put the thermostat back into its housing. And then I'm going to start filling up the bottom of the radiator. Alright, I'm going to fill the lower portion of the radiator through the thermostat housing. If you want to just do through the radiator cap, that's fine too. I don't think it's going to make any difference. The only reason I'm going to do from the bottom here, at least the starting portion, is just to push any of the air out from the very bottom. So for coolant capacity, I believe that this car is a 1 gallon. I forgot to mention this, but make sure that you put the radiator drain plug back in before you start refilling the system. Otherwise, you're just going to drain all your brand new coolant back into your drain pan. Alright, so now the thermostat housing can be tightened back on. Alright, start the 2 bolts by hand and then with your ratchet. Once you feel resistance, do both sides, and now just give it a 1/4 turn. Or just a slight turn for that matter. What is the torque for these? I don't know. I don't really torque anything. I've had other mechanics tell me the same thing. They're only 10 millimeter. Don't be aggressive because you will snap these things off, but even that should be fine. So what I'm going to do now is fill the radiator through the radiator cap, and then I need to fill the block through here. Alright, a little bit of coolant came out through the top here. That means that the radiator is now full, or at least preliminary full for that matter. So we will put our radiator cap back on, tighten it, and now I'm going to finish filling the system through the top hose. Now by filling through the top hose, we're going to fill the top of the engine block. Alright, the top clamp can now be put on the hose. So what I suggest is the indentation, the imprint of the clamp on the hose, put it in the exact same spot. Now for some reason this one is off to the side, but when I have to replace this hose, that's when I'll put the two wings here at the very top. Alright, for the reservoir, there's this little hole here, this channel, and that is where the bottom tab is going to fit in. Alright, the 10mm bolt for the reservoir can now be put back in. Now, because it's only plastic, once again, don't be overly aggressive, just until it's snug. And that's fine right there. Okay, the reservoir has to be filled. Alright, for the reservoir, I would suggest fill it up to max. Remember, the system is going to pull coolant from the reservoir later on, so it's better just to go up to the max. And now the reservoir cap can be put back on. Okay, the remaining water and coolant needs to be dumped out. Guys, make sure that you dispose of your coolant in an environmentally responsible way. Take it to a transfer station, an automotive shop. Don't leave this out, and don't dump it on the ground. It's toxic for animals, and it's also bad for the environment. So let's be environmentally responsible. Alright, make sure that your radiator cap is on tight. Everything is good to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start the car. I'm going to let it run for a couple minutes here, and then I'm going to do a test drive. Now, on the test drive, I highly recommend stay close to the house in case something happens. But other than that, what needs to now happen is the car needs to be driven up to operating temperature, and then the radiator cap needs to be removed, and then the rest of the system needs to be filled up. What we need to do is warm up the car to operating temperature to have the thermostat pop open, and that is going to help us get the remaining air out. If you do not do this step, you are going to have overheating issues. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and start the car. So I've turned the blower to the off position just so it's not so loud. But I'm going to start the car. I'm going to run it for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to take it for a test drive. Make sure that you open the garage door so you have ventilation for the exhaust. Alright, the radiator cap needs to be taken off. You can either shut off the engine, or I just leave it running. So the top hose is warm, the bottom hose is warm as well. That means that the thermostat is popped open. Make sure that you're wearing safety glasses and use a thick towel. I'm going to use a shirt for when you pop open the radiator cap. So you can see the bubbles of air coming out, and now the level has dropped down because air is escaping the system. And now finish filling up the radiator. Alright, last but not least, check for leaks. So the bottom hose the top here. You see a little bit of steam coming off. That's the coolant that was dripping off the side. So I ran the car for about 20 minutes, and the coolant level is going to go down. Refill it a little bit, but you're watching for bubbles, and what you want is just no more bubbles, and then you'll be good to go. So I'm going to take the car for one more spin, but I'm assuming that I'm not going to have any issues. So what we'll do now is an overview of this job. Alright guys, so that concludes this job. So this is a really easy car to do a coolant flush on. I didn't run into any issues. The one thing that I will say is, once you're all done, make sure that you keep an eye on the coolant level for a week or two after. I had to refill my coolant reservoir once, but if your coolant reservoir is constantly going down, that means you have a leak somewhere. And keep in mind, once you get into higher mileage, you can expose a leak after you do your coolant flush because sludge in the system plugged up the leak. So that's one thing that you do have to keep in mind. That's one caveat about doing your fluid changes, that if you have a leak, you can expose it later on. But if you stay on top of your fluid changes, I don't think you're going to have any sludge in the system to build up. The time on this job. The time was about an hour and a half. So it was about 20 minutes just running the car, and then everything else I would say would be probably about an hour. But as long as you allot yourself an hour and a half, then I don't think you're going to have any issues on this job. The cost of this job. The cost was about $60. So when I bought the coolant, I asked what is the local dealership rate, and they said $185 plus tax. So at 1 hour, you saved yourself $200 off the bat. If you go to a dealership at the time of this recording, I'm going to ballpark, it's going to cost you $300. So you can do a $300 job for roughly $60 with a minimal investment in resources. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope the method I showed you here will be quick and simple for you to follow so you can do this on your own. Guys, next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.